YouTube found a community, Discograffiti fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens. We're joined here today by David Gebroe from Discograffiti, the up and coming, really fascinating podcast. I'll put it that way because you get into the nitty gritty of things. David, man, it's great to meet you. How's it going? How you feeling? What's up?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm feeling pretty good, and a lot of things are up. I mean, I'm sure I don't have to explain to you that our work never ends. I don't really see it as work, but I'm constantly doing stuff for the show.
Yeah.
Uh, Ever since it originated 3.5 years ago, I don't think a moment has gone by where, in some way, shape, or form, I was connected to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a part of your DNA at this
Yeah.
point in your life. It's everything you do. Yeah. For those who are new to Discograffiti, how would you describe the show? Like in a how because when I first started listening, my first word was intense or in depth. Um, what would you use? How would you describe it?
Those are both very apt descriptions, and the reason why it's in depth is because the way that I listen to music preceded the show. The show itself was my life for years, and then the show originated with myself and my best friend Joe Kennedy, who after episode 37 decided he wanted to live a sane existence. And this was no longer a lark with two friends. It was one person taking it much more seriously than we had originally envisioned it. But the show was always meant to be the way I listen to music, which is I would describe it as doing a trawl with an artist.
Mm,
So I would go from the beginning and listen to everything that the artist did. I would not move past an album until I knew it backwards and forwards and read up on everything and do a bunch of research for no show, just for my life.
yeah.
And and so we created this podcast, but the reason why it's intense is because while this was going on, there were a lot of medical things that were happening to me. So it went
Mm,
from just this like, hey, wouldn't this be fun, to I got my son was 6 months old, and I got kidney cancer.
oof.
Then, as soon as that was successfully dealt with, I had two neck surgeries within 2 weeks. I had to take a year off of work, learn how to walk again. I had crippling insomnia. I had another medical issue which caused me to bleed out and almost bleed to death. And I was just living in this moment to moment reality where I felt like I was going to die any minute.
Mm,
Health issues, thankfully, are mostly dealt with, but the intensity that you recognize in it, it comes from, music was always just like yourself. It was an instrumental, an integral part of my being as a kid. But then, you get older and you're supposed to outgrow this stuff. But
yeah.
but as these things are occurring to me, I felt all of a sudden, like with every passing day, more and more intensive and connected to it. And it was the life force. And these things started meaning everything to me.
Yeah.
So, so these are deep dives
Mm.
that utilize star ratings and nerdy lists as a loss leader for some really, what to me are very, very important issues. And staying on the phone for hours with a guest who
Yeah.
don't know they're going to be on the phone for hours. Like it was, for example, Carney Wilson's longest interview she ever did. You
Right.
don't know what people are going to say after a long time on the phone. You get to some intense places that kind of go beyond music.
Yeah, I mean, once you start talking to somebody for that long, things explore, you go down different rabbit holes. You're not just, hey, what's your favorite album? It's like, oh, here's life now. It's
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, some of some of the potential for the show, I think I really started to notice in a 16-hour interview I do with Michelle Phillips, where, we would weave in and out of her, crying hysterically and then laughing like crazy, and realizing this is like, I'm sort of in a territory where a lot of people aren't existing right
Mm,
now, because it's about the attenuation of the of a person's focus these days.
Yeah.
Really just like getting 30-second clips on the internet. My son, who's 6 years old, he starts his attention starts wandering after a couple minutes if something exciting doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So this is about, a deep sea dive and an exploration, and that can take time. And the Beach Boys, who are my favorite band, I'm doing this in a way now. It's the first really long form series because it's my favorite band, and I'm slowing it down to a serious crawl. I mean,
Yeah.
we're gonna be looking. There's going to be episodes about The Flame. There's going to be episodes about, Mike Love's Celebration Records. Everything to do with the Beach Boys, there will
Yeah.
be an episode about.
That's really rad. I'm glad there's more people in the community deep diving Beach Boy stuff. It's been growing a lot in the last few years, and everyone's been so intelligent, so respectful of their work and their lives, and it's been really wonderful to see. And you mentioned, Celebration and the Flame and stuff. How did you get into the Beach Boys? Like, what's your story of discovering them?
So my dad is a big Beach Boys fan, and growing up, I knew the surface level Beach Boys. I knew
Right.
the National Monument Beach Boys.
Yeah.
I knew Fun, 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 and all this stuff. And then when I was about 17 in 1989, I started coming across, not even the bootlegs, but hissy tapes of bootlegs for
hmm
Smile, and Smile blew me away. I mean,
Yeah.
I got this tattoo when in 1989, and it to me represents not only everything that's possible, the boundarylessness of creativity and the possibilities of life and the possibilities and limitlessness of the mind, but
Yeah.
also it represents to me the story of Icarus, and what the dangers that are inherent in trying to explore where those boundaries are or aren't.
That's probably the best way to sum up Smile in a very quick snapshot. Is that one of your favorite Beach Boys projects, or is it your favorite one?
It's my favorite album of all time by any artist is
It is.
Smile,
That's
and my
cool.
second favorite is Pet Sounds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What strikes you more about Smile? Because for a lot of people, I feel like Pet Sounds is more relatable as a human, just for the emotional state of the lyrics, whereas Smile is a bit more artsy fartsy, esoteric. Like, what grabs you more about Smile than Pet Sounds?
I don't see Smile as artsy fartsy. What I'm hearing in that music, first of all, I'm hearing somebody that, when you get to, for example, Brian Wilson presents Smile, as much as I love that,
Yeah,
and it's an incredible piece of work, what is interesting to me about that is that it's a beautiful recreation. It's almost like, if you weren't well versed in Smile, you might not even be able to tell them apart.
sure.
But what I hear when I hear that is it's almost like a Saturday morning cartoon version of Smile, with all the pain and the hurt and the damage and the yearning and the howling into the chasm that I
Hmm.
hear in those tapes in 66 and 67, just sucked right out of it. There's, to me, a very intense emotional undertow. It just happens to have lyrics on top of it that are painted in by a linguist. But like, for example, watching Brian on the Inside Pop thing, you
Yeah,
know how can you not be emotionally moved by that?
right.
Yeah, sure, there's Sergeant Peppery lyrics, but to me that's as moving as anything on Pet Sounds, if not more.
I can dig that. Yeah, I would say musically, there's a lot of moments in Smile that tug at your heartstrings, especially with Surf's Up. I mean, that song is incredible.
Yeah.
Um, what sort of led you to, so you got into the records, as a kid and you discovered Smile. What led you down the rabbit hole to dig deeper in their discography? Was Smile the catalyst for that? And what was next in terms of like the heavier, deeper, weirder stuff?
Well, I'm like that generation of Beach Boys fan that, was, had the twofers
Yeah.
thrust on in 1990.
Yep.
So once those were being released, I just started plowing through them, and David Leaf's liner notes, and all the great quotes from Andy Paley in there. I
Yeah.
still can almost recite word for word
I know.
what
Yeah.
he said about Drive In, for instance.
Yeah.
When I hear the song Drive In, I think of Andy Paley's comment in the liner notes that was
Yeah.
quoted. Um, but so going through and discovering Friends and all these other records and discovering the depth. It's like looking at an iceberg, and what's poking out of the water are all the songs that people associate with the Beach Boys. And I was trying to anyone that was unfortunate enough to cross my path during that time got the whole lecture about
Yeah.
Smile and Manson, Never Learn Not to Love, and Holland. And to me, it was the most interesting thing in the world to know that there was this much that there was just this massive backstory that people didn't know about this band that was so famous.
Yeah. I mean, especially around that time when those two first came out, it was the 90s were kind of an interesting time for them anyway, but what was it like for you being a fan of the Beach Boys in the 90s? Because that's when I was a kid. So for me it was like Home Improvement, Full House guys, and it was like I got razzed on so hard for liking that group at the time. But what was it like to be a teenager during that time and loving that band?
I was an out. I remember in there was gauze on my tattoo,
Mm.
and my dad took me to see the Beach Boys live at some outdoor art center thing, and I brought Dominic Priore's "Look, Listen, Vibrate, Smile" with me because there was no internet at the time,
You're
and
right.
so I figured here's my chance to possibly meet somebody who is a Beach Boys fan who knows about Smile. So I went there with the book on my chest, with the cover showing, just hoping that somebody would pass me who knew about it, and they did. And so I became friends with a guy who, I was friends with for years.
Yeah.
And I went down to the front row, and I really only had interaction with Carl. But I will
Cool.
never, ever forget this. Carl, I showed him my tattoo, and in between numbers, and this was not a time when they were reconnecting with the coolness of their past.
Yeah.
They were not there yet.
Yeah.
It was really a cheesy show.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and for me at that time, I was really only into what I would deem cool Beach Boys. I wasn't really, I wasn't digging the California Girls thing with the, beautiful women parading around in bikinis
Hmm.
with these old guys on stage. It didn't seem very cool to me, but these moments I had with Carl, where in between each number, I'd be yelling out "Cabin Essence," and he, God bless him, would go into the very beginning of each song for me, and then roll his eyes and go, "Yeah, right." But he would start each song just for me, and it was so amazing.
That's insane. That's
Yeah.
so cool, man. Oh my God. Um, well, let's talk about your podcast a little bit because, as I said before, it's very in depth, it's very involved. What's been your biggest takeaway from chatting with members in the Beach Boys community on the phone and talking to these people who are involved in it so heavily or related to the project, if you want to call it that, related to the
Well,
band over the years? What's been sort of your takeaways from doing this?
well, here's the thing: is the first episode that I posted was the first thing that I got on tape, which was the David Marks interview. And I
Hmm.
don't know if you heard the David Marks interview.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not representative of what the series is. In fact, it's probably going to be the only interview I would imagine that I ever have on the show that's like that. But it just, because David Marks comes into the story first, he belongs there.
Sure.
So I
Yeah.
aired that first, and the comments that I got ranged from literally, "That's the best interview I've ever heard about anything with anyone," and I got that from a lot of people,
Hmm.
to "That's an abomination and you have no morals whatsoever." And there's no truth, but everyone's got their opinion, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And so going on the Endless Harmony message board, I was going to introduce myself in the series, but I saw there was an endless parade of posts already about me and people had me figured out and people knew nothing about me
Of
or
course.
anything or any backstory about how it came to be. um, so I'd have to say that my talks with people in the community, some were good, some were not good. But the people that I talked with about the records who were on the show, they were all good, except for one person whose name I will not reveal, but
Better
they'll,
off.
but yeah, uh, but it's been, I've never tried to do anything this large on the show. And I post 4 shows a week, and they're not 5-minute shows.
Right.
Some of them are as long as, I have an episode that I'm working on now with Dennis Dyke and two other guests. It's going to be Patreon only, and it's going to be almost 3 hours long about summer days and summer nights. And, and 4 shows a week like that, it's intense.
Yeah.
So, um, but I just love when people have a strong opinion about music, and anyone that's like that, I can wind up talking with them endlessly about it. And the show at the end of the day is really going to be an amalgam of people who are associated with the Beach Boys, whether family members, including Marilyn, who's coming up, guys in the band themselves. Al Jardine's coming up. Um, and then people who are just in music, period. Pete Buck from REM is going to be doing Beach Boys Love You. Marshall Crenshaw is doing Smiley Smile. Ira Kaplan from Yola Tango is
Yeah.
going to be doing Good Vibrations. The list goes on and on. I mean, there's more than 50 guests who've committed at this point, and we're only on 1964 right now. So, yeah, I mean, everyone's got their own take. Some are authors, musicologists who can talk in depth. And then
Yeah.
other people, it'll just be their way of connecting personal experience to the music.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, when you talked to Carney Wilson, it is a long interview. What was it like to sort of just hang out with her and hear stories? And because she doesn't talk too much about Beach Boys stuff, but like, what was it like to have her sort of open up about things that you may not have known about her and the Beach Boys relation?
It was great. I mean, honestly, the apotheosis of how I always imagined this series being and what I was really going for
Yeah.
well, there were a couple moments. One is when she was describing what Brian's typical breakfast would be in the 1970s.
Yeah.
These are the kinds of things that I wanted to uncover because, like you, I've read a lot of the books, I've heard a lot of the interviews, I know the standard spiel.
Right.
And so, and when she was talking about in the third episode about, how the Wilsons fart, how Audrey farted, and how Brian will fart, that's exact, not just because it's sophomoric, but because where am I going to turn to find details like that?
We don't know those stories. Yeah.
Right, right. That's the kind of stuff that is really of interest to me. I want to find out, like with Marilyn, what's going to be the thrust of the interview is I really want to know what is it like to Brian is not only a genius, but she's married to him at the height of when he's firing on all cylinders. What is it like to, on a day-to-day basis to be in a situation like that where, you're like fighting, you're just hanging on for dear life, probably day after day after day.
Yeah.
And eventually, if the conversation is long enough, details will be uncovered just by sheer dint of length of time.
Yeah.
Details will be uncovered about what that was like.
What got you into interviewing? Because your level of communication and your knack for vocabulary is fascinating to listen to. So what kind of got you into that mode of wanting to dig into people and see where they come from or how they relate to certain projects?
I started this show and it was two guys talking about music and
So that
then
was it, just hanging out.
and then that guy left the show.
Yeah.
So it became a guest focused and guest oriented show because
Wow.
he left, and I knew that I had, I knew my ability to connect with people
Yeah.
and to talk about real things was intact,
Yeah.
but I honestly had no idea that I'd be able to be, so locked in and do this. The trademark thing that this show really is are these long form explorations, and that there was really no precedent for me.
Yeah. I mean, it is fascinating because you do hang on with them for such a long time. Um, how would I word this question? When you talk to David Marks, and you've seen a lot come up
You don't
with,
have to couch it. You can go ahead and just you don't have to treat it tenderly if you're trying to find the right words.
oh, that's just how I am. But like when you chatted with David Marks, you've seen a lot of the comments back and forth about whether people were into it or not into it. Like, what was your gut instinct when you got him on the phone and hung out with him for the first like 20 minutes or so, and that it went on from there? Like, were you kind of holding on for dear life? Were you kind of like, oh man, like it feels kind of weird, or like, oh, I got this, or like, what was your gut saying in those moments?
I was holding on for dear life. I didn't have any notes, none. I
Yeah,
mean, usually when I'm doing an interview, I have reams of notes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Reams. I mean, like for the Michelle Phillips interview, I had 150 pages of notes.
Oh my God.
So I'm ready to go.
Yeah,
Uh, and it also allows you to let go during the interview because there's always a train track to get back on. With,
completely.
but with David, I was, hanging on for dear life. The reason for the call really was to just set up an interview.
Right, right.
That was the reason that the call was made.
Yeah,
And um, so when he's, taking bong rips and coughing up a lung and, talking about boozing it up and everything, I got to tell you that this is somebody who knows A, that they're being recorded, and B, knows this is not a print story. This is an audio podcast. He knows this.
yeah, right,
So far be it from me to judge why this is happening, but it's not for me to decide what the right or wrong thing to do is. This is the interview because he's telling me, David, this is the interview. He's
yeah,
saying that not in very. He's clearly saying, this is the interview. We're not doing it another time.
right.
So, okay, this is the interview then. And so, what I see it in a way that some other people agree with me about, which is that John Stebbins, who knows him better than probably anyone that I've spoken with about this topic, says that is David when the mics aren't on. So
Yeah,
who am I to say it wouldn't be right to post this because A, B, or C?
right.
No, I mean, frankly, also I know from personal experience that if somebody is aligned with doing substances a great deal for a long period of time, it's not like they've lost control of their senses and they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Somebody who is, and I actually know that he's sober right now,
Mm.
but somebody who is not sober and is like defiantly unsober, they're not doing substances and being like this. That's when you first get drunk when you're
Right,
16. This is somebody who just uses because, they brush their teeth or they tie their shoes. And I have personal experience with that because, I have had issues with substances. So I know what that's like.
right,
And, I still didn't think twice about should I or shouldn't I post it. It never even entered my mind, should I ditch this? Or I had somebody call me who I actually, this shouldn't be a secret uh, because they reached out to me. Michael Campion, who I believe is part of the Surf City All Stars or
mm.
has some kind of connection, he offered me a lame straight interview with David if I would just take down this interview. And I don't know why. I don't think that David put him up to it because David has my number. And if he
Yeah.
didn't want it up there, he could have called me and he never called me.
True.
So
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
called me a bunch of other times after the interview. We spoke a number of times after that interview,
Really?
and he never said, "You know what? I'm having second thoughts about that interview."
Yeah. Has he heard it, do you know?
I have no idea. And I know people who've talked to, especially John, who've talked to him a bunch, and he hasn't
Yeah.
mentioned anything about hearing the interview.
That's cool. And I know that episode's kind of an outlier in what you do in your series, but like, um, for people watching this video for the first time who haven't dived or, jumped into your podcast yet, what's the biggest takeaway you want from people to feel when they listen to your podcast?
I want them to get a sense of who the people are that are talking about the records. Because again, the music is a vessel through which I'm trying to find out some truths about myself and the person that I'm talking to, or talking with. So that's the primary thing. And then also, if I'm talking to people who are connected with or are a Beach Boy, I want to find out some things I didn't know. I
Yes.
don't want the same, that's, would be a challenging thing, with the actual Beach Boys. I was lucky with David, because he was bold enough, no matter what you think about the interview, he was courageous enough to be honest with me about how he felt.
Yep.
And, I just hope that with the other band members that I wound up speaking with, that there's a modicum or even just a fraction of what I got from David with them.
Yeah.
Because, the sun is setting on this thing. At some point in the near future, there will be no living original Beach Boys, and then there won't be an opportunity to do this.
That's
And so,
exactly it.
we had the whitewashed Disney documentary where we learned nothing. If you're a fan, you learn nothing.
Hmm.
You really didn't. It was nice, but we learned nothing. And so here's, maybe one of our last chances to find something new out.
Seeking the realness and just the honesty from the guys being the guys and not the little story they've told us a billion times.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not looking for them to be anything in particular. I'm
Yeah,
not looking for any dirt. I'm not looking for backstabbing. I'm also not looking for the Disney documentary.
right.
Just something real.
Just something different. Yeah,
Because at this point, it shouldn't matter. It's the end of the day. This thing is like the sun is setting.
yeah. It's intense. David, thank you so much for doing this interview here. How can people find you? Where can they support you? What's your website? Facebook, Instagram, all kind of stuff. Like, where can they find you? I'll put
Um,
links below too.
Thank you. And by the way, thank you for both A, having me on and for what you do. Because, like you said earlier, there's a lot of people who have kind of jumped on let's interview a lot of the Beach Boy, the peripheral people on the scene. There's a lot of people who don't do it well. And you're not one of those people. And, it's really a great thing to have you doing what you're doing.
Thank
Um,
you, man.
and to
Appreciate that.
specialize in this band.
Yeah, thank you.
But anywhere that people listen to podcasts, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, it's Discograffiti. It's the words disco graffiti mashed together into one word. And if you want to support the show and get more than one episode a week and get up to 4 shows a week, you know, all these episodes, if you want every episode that I'm doing and every guest that I have to that are talking about the Beach Boys, it's only going to be on Patreon, and
Yeah,
that's patreon.com/discograffiti. And there's a bunch of different tiers. And if you want, if money is an issue, you can actually be a free member of my Patreon and just find out about all the shows as they come out.
oh, cool.
The ones that are not free, you can, if you like, you can get them piecemeal, and there's also sneak peek versions of the bonus episodes that you
Cool.
can hear online as well.
Jeez, that's awesome. That's a lot of work, man.
It is, yeah.
Well, David, thank you so much for being on the show. Everyone watching, check out the links below. Go follow David. Check out the Patreon. Check out the podcast. And as I always say to everybody I talk to doing Beach Boys stuff, thanks for keeping the summer alive because we're all doing this together. And as long as we're all chatting about the Beach Boys, they'll never die.
That's
So
true.
it means a
Also,
lot.
another great place to chat about the Beach Boys. I have a Facebook group that is very engaged, very active. A lot of Beach Boy talk in there, and
Cool.
the group is called the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound.
I love it. Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you. Thanks so much for being on.
Giggins, I really appreciate you, man. Thank you. What's your favorite Beach Boys album?
Ooh. I usually say Friends.
That's a great one.
Typically, if I have to pick one, that's like my comfy vibe out. That's the one. Yeah, typically.
That's a great answer. Isn't that it's Brian's too, right?
It might be. Yeah, I think it's one of his favorites. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you ask me tomorrow, I'd say Sunflower or Smiley Smile. It's too many to pick.
And Summer in Paradise is always there on the list too,
It's
somewhere.
there's some bangers on that one.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, thanks, man.
Thank you, Giggins.